At 3:17 in the morning, the dead lighthouse opened its eye. It had no keeper, no working wires, no power from the town. Yet a warm, golden beam began to turn across the fog. But it was not shining toward the sea. Every 11 seconds, it stopped on the same place inland, an empty house at the end of East Cliff Road, the house where Daniel Ward had lived as a child, the house his father had left 30 years before and never returned to. Bracken Cove was a cold coastal town that had learned to live quietly beside old things. Salt covered the windows. Empty boats rested behind locked sheds. Above the harbor stood Vesper Point Lighthouse, a pale shape on the cliffs. It had been abandoned for 40 years. The council had cut its power cables, sealed its door, and chained the path. Modern navigation lights had made it useless, and the cliff beneath it was considered too dangerous to repair. Then, on a cold October morning, it began to shine. People watched from their windows. By sunrise, everyone had agreed not to speak about it. The official notice blamed reflected light from a passing ship. No one believed that. Ships did not make old lighthouse lenses turn, and reflected light did not pause on one house again and again. Before noon, a photograph reached Daniel Ward. On the back, someone had written 5 words. "It is looking for you." Daniel had not returned to Bracken Cove in 22 years. He was 38 now, quiet and careful, with the habit of leaving questions unfinished. He rarely spoke about his childhood. He spoke even less about his father. Jonah Ward had been the town electrician. When Daniel was 8, Jonah walked toward Vesper Point during a storm and disappeared. There was no body, no coat on the rocks, only his tool bag, found beside the locked lighthouse door. For years, Daniel believed his father had chosen to leave. His mother never said that. But grief can fill silence with its own answers. Daniel arrived in Bracken Cove as rain turned the streets silver. He drove past the harbor and stopped outside his childhood home. The windows were dark. The garden wall had fallen inward. The sea was hidden by fog, but he could hear it below the cliff. Then, the lighthouse beam crossed the house and rested on Daniel's face. For 3 seconds, it did not move. And in that light, a memory returned. His father kneeling beside him on the night he vanished. Rain on Jonah's coat. One hand resting on Daniel's shoulder. And a sentence Daniel had forgotten. When a light points the wrong way, don't follow it. Look behind you. The town records office stood beneath the old courthouse, in a room that smelled of paper and damp stone. Daniel searched through maintenance reports, council files, and lighthouse logs. The official records ended on the day Vesper Point was closed. But inside the final logbook, he found newer pages folded into the back cover. The handwriting belonged to his father. Jonah had drawn the cliff in careful lines. He had marked a hidden chamber beneath East Cliff Road and a sea tunnel below Daniel's childhood home. One note had been underlined twice. Water pressure rising behind the old gate. Another page contained dates, tide heights, and the same numbers again and again. 317. Then Daniel found the final line. If the lower chamber opens, the warning will begin at 3:17. A letter beside it warned the town council that the cliff was hollow. An iron gate, built long before the lighthouse, was holding back the sea beneath the road. The council had rejected the report. At the bottom, Jonah had added one sentence by hand. If they will not listen, I will build something that cannot be ignored. Taped beneath the page was a brass key. Its faded label read, Lamp Room. Daniel reached Vesper Point after midnight. Rain moved sideways across the cliff. The chain on the path had broken, although the metal showed no fresh cut. The lighthouse door opened with the brass key. Inside, the air was strangely warm. Daniel stepped into the darkness and looked up. The stairs curved above him, disappearing around the stone walls. Water ran down the sides of the tower, but the middle of every step was dry, as if someone had climbed them only moments before. Daniel began to climb. His footsteps moved upward through the empty tower. At every turn, a band of golden light crossed the stairs, then vanished. The higher he climbed, the warmer the air became. At the top, he found another door. Behind it, something old was still moving. Daniel entered the lamp room. The great glass lens was turning by itself. Its warm beam moved slowly across the fog, disappeared over the town, and returned again. Behind the lens stood a machine made from copper pipes, a tide gauge, and one of Jonah's old generators. Its cables disappeared into the floor, toward the sea. It should have rusted away years ago. Instead, its needle was moving. With every sweep, the lens slowed and faced inland, toward East Cliff Road. On the wall hung a clock, stopped at 3:17. Below it sat a cassette recorder inside a metal box. Daniel stared at it for several seconds. Then he pressed play. There was only the sound of wind, a quiet breath. And then, his father's voice filled the room, older than Daniel remembered, tired, but calm. Daniel, if you are hearing this, the lower gate has failed. The light is not for the ships. I changed the lens. When the sea reaches the final mark, the tide will power the lamp and point it toward the ground above the chamber. You may think I left you. I know that is what it will look like. Outside, the beam crossed the rain. The night I disappeared, the old gate broke. Water was moving under the road. If it opened fully, the cliff would have taken the house, and half the town with it. Daniel closed his eyes. A memory returned. His father carrying him through the storm. His mother waiting inside a car. Jonah placing Daniel in the back seat, then turning back toward the lighthouse. I went below to close the gate by hand. I do not know if I will come back out. I did not leave you, son. The tape clicked. For several seconds, there was silence. Then, almost too quietly to hear, Jonah spoke once more. I stayed. Daniel looked at the tide gauge. The needle had entered a red section marked with one word: now. The lighthouse beam stopped turning. It held steady on the ground behind the old house. and Daniel finally understood his father's warning. When a light points the wrong way, look behind you. The lighthouse was not asking Daniel to come closer. It was showing him where the danger was. The sea tunnel continued beneath the same road Daniel had used to reach the cliff. Daniel ran down the stairs and out into the rain. Behind the house, the earth had begun to sink. Thin cracks opened across the wet road. From below came 3 deep metal knocks, then 1, then 7. Not a message, a pressure signal. Daniel backed away. The ground shook once. The empty house leaned toward the sea as softly as a ship leaving harbor. Then the cliff beneath it gave way. Stone, earth, and 30 years of silence disappeared into the fog. For one brief moment, the broken cliff revealed a chamber below. Daniel saw an iron wheel locked in place, a rusted tool bag, and a metal plate fixed to the wall. J. Ward. Then the sea covered it. By dawn, the rain had stopped. No one in Bracken Cove was hurt. The collapse had taken the empty house and part of the closed road, but it ended before reaching the first homes in town. People called it luck. Daniel knew better. His father's warning had waited in darkness for 30 years. Through storms, through silence, through the slow movement of the sea. It had waited until the old gate could hold no longer. Daniel returned to the lighthouse one last time. The lens was still. The machine had gone cold. The tape had reached its end. For most of his life, Daniel had carried the pain of being left behind. Now he understood that his father's final act had not been leaving. It had been staying where no one else could. Daniel placed the brass key beneath the stopped clock. As he turned toward the stairs, the dead lamp flashed once. A single warm light touched his shoulder. It crossed the glass and passed out over the sea. Then Vesper Point Lighthouse went dark again. This time, Daniel was not afraid of the darkness. Some lights guide us home. Others are left burning by those who could not return.